journey through 9 centuries of history. After the Norman Conquest, as the fog-laden horizon of London witnessed the dawn of a new era in English history, William the Conqueror made a decision that would forever alter the landscape of British power. In the year 1078, he ordered the construction of what would become one of the most formidable fortresses in history, the Tower of London. Standing proudly on the north bank of the River Thames, this architectural marvel was strategically positioned to defend the city and serve as a towering reminder of Norman authority over the newly subdued Anglo-Saxon population. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle recorded the reaction of the locals in that same year. The king built the Great Tower in London, and many counties that owed labour service were harshly oppressed during the castle's construction. At its heart rose the White Tower, the central keep of the fortress, a true testament to Norman ingenuity. Its walls reached heights of 90 feet and measured up to 15 feet thick at the base. Constructed with Kentish limestone and reinforced with carn stone imported from William's native Normandy, the distinctive Norman architectural style, with rounded arches and sturdy cylindrical pillars, created an imposing silhouette that dominated the medieval skyline of London. The tower's base measured an impressive 118 by 105 feet, making it the largest building of its kind in Christian Europe. Gundulf, Bishop of Rochester, known as the Builder Bishop, oversaw the construction and introduced innovative features such as a fortified entrance, accessible only by wooden stairs that could be destroyed in the event of an assault. The Chapel of St. John, nestled within the White Tower, remains one of the finest examples of Norman ecclesiastical architecture in England. Over time, successive monarchs expanded the original structure, each adding their own architectural flourishes and defensive upgrades. During his brief returns from the Crusades, Richard the Lionheart initiated the construction of the moat in 1190. His brother, King John, strengthened the defences further. But it was Henry III who truly transformed the tower, adding the Wakefield and Lanthorn towers and creating luxurious royal lodgings adorned with colourful tapestries and intricate paintings. According to royal records from 1236, Henry ordered the Queen's chamber walls to be painted with roses and decorated with branches of summer and winter. In 1235, the royal menagerie was established, housing exotic animals including a polar bear, gifted by the King of Norway in 1252. The bear was often led down to the Thames on a long chain to fish for its own food, astonishing the people of London. As a royal residence, the tower reached its zenith during the medieval period, hosting monarchs before their coronations and serving as a secure retreat during times of civil unrest. Edward I, known as Longshanks, expanded the royal apartment significantly and established the Jewel House, where the crown jewels have been stored since 1303. Among these priceless treasures is the famed Cullinan diamond, weighing 3,106 carats in its uncut form, the largest gem-quality diamond ever discovered. The imperial state crown alone contains 2,868 diamonds, 273 pearls, 17 sapphires, 11 emeralds, and 5 rubies. In 1671, Colonel Thomas Blood nearly succeeded in stealing the crown jewels while disguised as a clergyman. When captured, he famously declared to Charles II, "I would have added the crown of England to my trophies." Surprisingly, the king pardoned him and granted him lands in Ireland worth £500 annually. The tower also served as the royal mint from the late 10th century until 1810. Records from Master William Chamberlain in 1279 reveal that over 4 million silver pennies were minted at the tower in a single year, a testament to its economic importance in medieval England. During Elizabeth I's reign, the royal armouries housed enough weapons and armour to equip 15,000 men. In 1605, master craftsman Jacob Halder, who worked at the tower from 1576 to 1608, produced some of the most ornate parade armours ever made, including the famously engraved silver armour for Sir James Scudamore, which would today cost the equivalent of a modern luxury car. As political tensions rose through English history, the tower's role evolved, from royal residence to state prison. The first recorded prisoner, Ranulph Flambard, Bishop of Durham, made a daring escape in 1101 by climbing down a rope smuggled in a wine barrel after hosting a feast for his guards. His escape led to a series of upgrades in tower security, including iron bars on windows and additional guard posts. The poet Charles, Duke of Orléans, captured at the Battle of Agincourt in 1415, spent 25 years imprisoned in the tower, during which he composed some of the finest French medieval poetry. One of his verses reads, "Go, my song, born of my tower of sorrow, find my lady and tell her I yet live." The Wars of the Roses marked a turning point in the tower's legacy, increasingly associating it with imprisonment and execution. The Salt Tower, built in the 1230s, gained notoriety for holding prisoners accused of witchcraft, while the Beauchamp Tower became known for its poignant prisoner graffiti, such as the single word Jane, believed to have been carved by Lord Guildford Dudley, husband of Lady Jane Grey, before their execution in 1554. The walls whisper countless stories. Philip Howard, 13th Earl of Arundel, carved the Latin phrase "Quanto plus afflictiones pro Christo in hoc seculo, tanto plus gloriae cum Christo in futuro." The more afflictions we endure for Christ in this world, the more glory with Christ in the next. Before his death in 1595. During the Peasants' Revolt in 1381, the tower served as a royal sanctuary when young King Richard II took refuge there as rebels ransacked the city. Its importance as a military bastion peaked again during the English Civil War. In 1642, parliamentarian forces seized the tower. Lieutenant General William Balfour recorded an inventory of 15,000 small arms, 200 barrels of gunpowder, and many cannons. The constable of the tower, Sir John Byron, surrendered without resistance, prompting poet Sir John Denham to write, "That sacred place where fortune's favour fell, sacred no more, but now the house of treason's smell." The tower's military role persisted into the 20th century. During World War II, German bombings damaged the structure, particularly during the Blitz of 1941. On September 5, 1940, a powerful bomb struck the northern battlements and the Jewel House. Still, the tower endured, symbolizing British resilience. The last prisoner held at the tower was Hitler's deputy, Rudolf Hess, briefly jailed in 1941 before being moved to military custody. It also served as the execution site for 12 German spies during World War I, the last executions carried out within its walls. The final person executed was Joseph Jacobs, shot by firing squad on August 15, 1941, in a small shooting range inside the tower grounds. Intriguingly, the tower has kept meticulous records of its prisoners and their living conditions. 15th century bills show that high-ranking inmates often enjoyed refined meals and had personal servants. While imprisoned in 1554 as a princess, Elizabeth I was allowed to walk in the garden, always under strict watch. Sir Walter Raleigh, jailed for 13 years, established a laboratory in his quarters where he conducted alchemical experiments and developed his famous elixir, the Great Cordial. Antiquarian John Stowe recorded that Raleigh's infant son was born in the tower and nicknamed Carew, Welsh for tower. In his writings, Raleigh reflected deeply on human nature. Who does not know that conscience is born of love? If I were to name its cause, I would say love is the root of conscience. The ravens of the tower add yet another layer of mystique. According to a legend from the reign of Charles II, if the ravens ever leave the tower, the kingdom will fall. The king, persuaded by his royal astronomer, who complained the birds interfered with his instruments, decreed that 6 ravens must always remain. Today, 7 ravens are kept, the required 6+1 backup, under the care of the Raven Master. With partially clipped wings to prevent escape, each raven has a name and a distinct personality. The most famous, Jim Crow, served for 44 years and could even bow to visitors. The chilling role of executioners at the tower. In the shadowy alleys of medieval London, where the walls of the tower whispered tales of power and punishment, a select group of men practiced what might have been the most macabre profession in history. These were the executioners of the Tower of London, their names forever tied to the final moments of some of England's most notable figures. Among them, Richard Brandon stands out as one of the most infamous. Known as the executioner of the king, Brandon, who inherited the position from his father, Gregory Brandon, earned grim fame as the masked man who beheaded King Charles I in 1649. He later claimed the act haunted him until his death the same year, confessing on his deathbed, "His ghost torments my dreams." Charles I's execution was particularly notable. Brandon received an unprecedented payment of £30, equivalent to around £4,000 today, along with the king's cloak, a traditional perquisite for the executioner. The poet Andrew Marvell would later write of that chilling moment, "He nothing common did or mean upon that memorable scene." Despite its financial perks, the role of executioner carried a powerful social stigma. Records from 1538 show that executioners earned about £23 annually, approximately £15,000 today, with additional payments per execution, 13 shillings and 4 pence for a beheading, 6 shillings and 8 pence for a hanging. These men often lived in isolated lodgings within the Tower complex, separated from prisoners and guards alike. John Ketch, perhaps the most notorious executioner of the late 17th century, was known to drink alone at the Lamb and Flag Tavern near the Tower, shunned by others despite his official status. Ketch became so infamous for botched executions that his name became a colloquial term for executioners, Jack Ketch, and was immortalized in puppet shows and street ballads. Diarist Samuel Pepys wrote in 1684, "I hear the executioner's name is Ketch, and he is so proud of his name that he has it written in golden letters over his door." Execution demanded considerable skill, particularly when it came to beheadings, often reserved for nobles and royalty. The executioner's axe, weighing around 7 pounds with an 18-inch blade, required tremendous strength and precision. The sword, considered a more honourable tool used for high-ranking nobles, demanded even greater finesse. The execution of Anne Boleyn in 1536 was carried out by a specially summoned French swordsman from Calais, famed for his swift technique. Henry VIII spared no expense, paying the modern equivalent of £23,000 to ensure a clean death for his second wife. The Frenchman Jean Rambaud was known for his method of distracting the condemned by asking them to look away moments before striking. Anne Boleyn's final words reflected this practice. "Thus I take my leave of the world and of you all. I heartily desire you to pray for me." Witnesses reported that even as the blade fell, her lips were still moving in prayer. The scaffold itself was a carefully crafted stage of death, typically raised 15 feet to allow the public a clear view. The execution of Lady Jane Grey in 1554 drew thousands of spectators. Contemporary accounts describe her walking calmly to the scaffold with a prayer book in her hands. The execution block, made of solid oak, featured a curved groove to cradle the neck. It was scrubbed thoroughly before each execution and often covered in straw to absorb blood. The Tower Green, reserved for private executions, measured roughly 33 by 24 feet, with the scaffold positioned to catch the morning light. The execution of Sir Thomas More in 1535 took place at dawn. He famously joked with his executioner, "I pray you, sir, see me safe up, and for my coming down, let me shift for myself." Thomas Andrew, the carpenter who built many of the Tower's scaffolds between 1480 and 1509, kept detailed records. Each platform required 650 nails and 47 planks of wood, costing around £4. Rituals and superstitions filled the grim role of the executioner. Documents from 1578 reveal that some executioners asked forgiveness from their victims before the fatal blow. Others drank heavily the night before to steady their nerves. The executioner of Catherine Howard, Henry VIII's fifth wife, reportedly practiced on sheep carcasses to ensure a clean strike. Francis Redkill, who served between 1485 and 1505, kept a detailed diary of his preparations, including the ritual of sleeping with his axe beneath his pillow and reciting a prayer, "Grant me strength to serve justice with mercy." Executioners held many superstitions. Some kept a piece of used hanging rope, believing it brought good luck. William Marwood, an executioner from a later era, upheld this tradition, writing, "The rope of the hangman holds power beyond death. It speaks to those who listen." The psychological toll was severe. Thomas Derrick, a convicted criminal pardoned in exchange for becoming an executioner, later wrote in his personal diary, discovered in 1862, "Every night I see their faces, noble and common alike, just before the blade falls." His diary offers a rare window into the minds of professional killers and the human cost of their deadly duty. Edward Dennis, who served from 1593 to 1605, was known to attend church twice daily and tend a small herb garden to calm his spirit. After executing Robert Devereux, 2nd Earl of Essex in 1601, Dennis fell into such a severe depression that he took a 3-month leave of absence. His wife, Isabel, wrote to the Privy Council, "The weight of souls lies heavy on him, and he seeks comfort in prayer and herbs." Not all executions went as planned. The beheading of Margaret Pole, Countess of Salisbury in 1541, became one of the most brutal in Tower history. At 67, she refused to lay her head on the block. The inexperienced executioner chased her across the scaffold, striking her repeatedly. According to a witness, Brother William Petto, she ran, and he followed with his axe, striking here and there until the 11th blow ended it. The executioner, identified in Tower records as Alexander Burwell, was so traumatized that he resigned and reportedly joined a monastery in Norfolk. Similarly, Sir Alexander Carew's execution in 1645 became infamous after executioner Raphael Griffin required 4 strokes to finish the job. The crowd reacted violently, and Griffin had to be escorted from the tower under armed guard. Poet John Taylor wrote, "When death's dark servant falters in his task, the condemned must wear the executioner's mask." The power to grant last-minute pardons lay with the monarch, often resulting in dramatic scenes. In 1483, Sir James Tyrrell was already kneeling at the block when a royal messenger arrived with a pardon from Richard III. The axe had already been raised, and legend claims Tyrrell's hair turned white from the fright. Ironically, he returned to the Tower years later, this time without reprieve, accused of murdering the princes in the Tower. Another dramatic case was John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland, in 1553. As he mounted the scaffold, a royal messenger arrived. The crowd believed it was a pardon, but it was merely a delay, allowing Dudley to witness the execution of his ally, Sir John Gates. The Tower's chaplain, Master Hugh Latimer, recorded Dudley's bitter words. "This delay is but to taste the bitterness of death twice." Executioners followed strict protocols. They often fasted before executions and ritually asked forgiveness from the condemned. The axe and block were covered with black cloth between uses, and the tools were meticulously maintained. A well-preserved 1597 inventory lists multiple axes, swords, and blocks, along with maintenance instructions. The edge shall be wetted with the finest stone and greased with whale fat to ensure the cleanest cut. William Rosewarden, who served from 1566 to 1578, kept records of tool care, including storing axes in salted leather to prevent rust. His manual, discovered in Tower archives in 1921, described testing blades on wine-filled gourds to mimic the resistance of human neck tissue. Even the executioner's attire followed strict codes. They wore a black mask, not so much for anonymity as to symbolize death's impartiality. Their clothing was usually black or dark grey, with leather aprons to guard against blood. On special occasions, like royal executions, they wore ceremonial black velvet hoods. Thomas Howard, named executioner in 1601, recorded the costs of his official garments: 2 fine leather masks at 4 shillings each, a velvet hood at 15 shillings, and Spanish leather boots at 8 shillings. The last words of Mary, Queen of Scots, in 1587 referenced this solemn attire: "I beg you to dispatch me quickly, and let your black robes be the last I see of this world." The executioner's duty extended beyond death. They were responsible for disposing of the body and belongings, often keeping certain items as perquisites of the job. After Sir Walter Raleigh's execution in 1618, executioner Richard Cook claimed his velvet cloak and silk doublet as payment. By 1600, a detailed perquisite schedule existed. Rings and jewels were returned to the family, but clothing and personal items belonged to the executioner. This led to the grim tradition of nobles wearing their poorest garments to avoid enriching the man who would take their life. Sir Thomas Wilson, a lieutenant of the Tower, wrote, "They come to die in rags, though they lived in silk, for none would enrich the man who ends their breath." The most dramatic executions in the history of the Tower. Across the centuries, within the ancient stones of the Tower of London, where ravens still guard centuries of dark secrets, some of the most dramatic final acts in British history unfolded. In this theatre of power, betrayal, and ultimate sacrifice, the Tower bore witness to stories that still echo through time. As medieval chronicler Matthew Paris wrote in 1236, "The Tower of London is a place where many enter, but few leave with their lives." The Tower's first recorded execution was that of William de Morisco in 1242, drawn and quartered for piracy and murder. This act would set the stage for centuries of judicial bloodshed within these walls. Yet perhaps no execution has captured the imagination more than that of Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII's second wife, whose fate was sealed on May 19, 1536. After spending her final days in the Queen's house, specifically room number 15, she fluctuated between hysteria and startling composure. Observers described how Anne walked to her death with a strange grace in her step. During her imprisonment, she was attended by 4 ladies, including Lady Mary Kingston, wife of the Tower's constable Sir William Kingston, who reported her behaviour in detailed letters to Thomas Cromwell. In one such letter, Kingston recounted a macabre jest. She said she heard the executioner was very good, and she had a little neck, at which point she placed her hands around her throat and laughed heartily. Even her enemies acknowledged her courage. Spanish Ambassador Eustace Chapuis, no friend of Anne, wrote, "Even her enemies must confess she died with great bravery." Her execution was unique in English history. Rather than an axe, a skilled French swordsman named Jean Rambaud, specially summoned from Calais, performed the act for £23, around £7,000 in today's money. Renowned across Europe for his swift and precise technique, he arrived in London 3 days prior and reportedly practiced on sheep carcasses at the Hung, Drawn and Quartered Tavern near the Tower. The poet Thomas Wyatt, imprisoned in the bell tower at the time, watched the execution from his window. Later, he wrote the haunting line, "These bloody days have broken my heart." According to Sir William Kingston, who witnessed the moment, the sword was so sharp and the strike so swift that Anne's head was severed before her lips had finished their final prayer. Just 18 years later, another queen met her fate on Tower Green, the teenage Lady Jane Grey. Her reign of 9 days remains one of the most tragic footnotes in English history. On February 12, 1554, the 17-year-old girl was led to the scaffold, her small frame wrapped in a black gown that, according to Tower expense records, cost 12 shillings to make. Dr. John Feckenham, who tried to convert her to Catholicism in her final days, wrote that she spent her last hours reading from a small velvet-bound prayer book given to her by Lieutenant John Bridges of the Tower. Inside, she inscribed a final message to her father. "Though you desire my death, Father, you shall find your punishment in time." That book still survives today in the British Library. Italian merchant Battista Spinola, present at her execution, wrote, "The sweetness of her countenance surpassed all that any mortal has shown in the hour of death." Another pivotal moment was the execution of Sir Thomas More on July 6, 1535. Refusing to acknowledge Henry VIII as supreme head of the Church of England, More spent 14 months imprisoned in the bell tower. By candlelight, he wrote his final works with charcoal on scraps of paper secretly passed to him by his daughter Margaret. Tower records reveal he was charged 1 penny a day for food and fuel, though his family was permitted to bring him extra provisions. His cell, measuring just 13 by 15 feet, can still be visited today, complete with its original stone fireplace and primitive latrine. Ambassador Chapuis noted that More's wit remained sharp even in captivity. When his wife begged him to submit to the king, he quipped, "Is not 20 years of life enough for you, woman?" His son-in-law William Roper recorded that upon learning his sentence had been changed from hanging to beheading, More joked, God forbid the king should use more such mercy with any of my friends. But perhaps the Tower's most enduring mystery is the fate of the princes in the Tower, 12-year-old Edward V and 9-year-old Richard, Duke of York. Sir James Tyrrell, executed in 1502, confessed under torture to murdering the boys on Richard III's orders. He claimed they were smothered with pillows and buried at the foot of a staircase. Tudor chronicler Polydore Virgil recorded that the princes were last seen playing with a ball in the Tower Gardens in August 1483, never to be seen again. The royal physician, Dr. Argentine, the last known person to see Edward alive, reported the boy had said, "I believe death is near." In 1674, skeletons were discovered beneath a staircase in the White Tower. King Charles II ordered them interred in a marble urn designed by Christopher Wren in Westminster Abbey. In 1789, workmen accidentally broke the tomb and found one skeleton measuring 4 feet 11 inches, matching Edward's estimated height at death. The difference between Tower Hill and Tower Green executions reflected the rigid social hierarchy of medieval and Tudor England. Tower Hill's scaffold stood 15 feet tall and could accommodate up to 10,000 spectators. The execution of Jack Cade's followers in 1450 drew such massive crowds that several people were crushed to death. Maintained by the City of London at a cost of £4 annually, the scaffold became a permanent fixture. Tower Green, by contrast, offered a more intimate, somber setting, rarely exceeding 200 witnesses. Spanish envoys wrote of Catherine Howard's execution in 1542. The privacy of the place made it even more terrible, as if death whispered instead of shouting. The Green had its own peculiar customs and rituals. The block itself was crafted from solid English oak by Tower carpenter John Ripley, who was paid £2 for each new one. Lady Rochford, executed alongside Catherine Howard, is said to have fainted at the sight of the block and had to be revived with smelling salts before her death could proceed. Tower surgeon Thomas Vicary received 33 shillings and 4 pence for attending each execution, though his services were rarely required. As diarist Edward Hall wrote in 1542, death in the Tower was administered with nothing more than ruthless efficiency. The ghostly residents and restless souls of the Tower. When dusk falls and the last tourists have departed, the Tower of London transforms from a historical monument into a realm where the past refuses to rest. Since 1078, these ancient stones have witnessed centuries of torture, executions, and intrigue, giving rise to what many consider one of the most haunted places in Britain. The first recorded ghostly encounter dates back to 1817, when guard Edmund Lenthal Swift witnessed a mysterious bear in the Martin Tower, an incident that, according to official Tower records, led to his death from shock 2 days later. Swift's last words, recorded by Tower physician Dr. James Morrison, were eerily specific. It was no trick of the light, no illusion of the mind. It was as real as the very stones themselves. This event prompted the first official investigation into supernatural phenomena within the Tower, led by Sir Robert Smirke, the Tower's architect. In his private diary, now preserved in the British Library, he documented 17 unexplained incidents between 1817 and 1820. Perhaps the Tower's most famous ghost is Anne Boleyn, whose tragic execution in 1536 appears to have tethered her spirit to the grounds. The first documented sighting by yeoman guard John Humphrey in 1864 sparked a long series of encounters with the ill-fated Queen. In his diary, Humphrey wrote, "She walked like one accustomed to command, her head held high despite its ghostly separation from her body." In 1933, Captain of the Guard Leonard Whitmore gave an especially detailed account. Not only did he see Anne, but her entire execution procession, including the French swordsman and her ladies-in-waiting, crossing Tower Green precisely at 8 a.m., the documented hour of her death. As Shakespeare wrote in Henry VIII, "After my death I desire no other herald of my actions but myself." It seems Anne's spirit is determined to ensure the living remember her. In 1976, during a famed encounter, Major General George Younghusband reported that the temperature in the chapel dropped so dramatically that frost formed on the interior walls in the middle of July. The chapel's logbook that evening documented a sudden plunge from 68 degrees Fahrenheit to 35 degrees Fahrenheit in mere minutes. The chilling mystery surrounding the Bloody Tower and the vanished princes has fueled some of the tower's most consistent paranormal activity. Edward V, age 12, and Richard, Duke of York, age 9, were last seen alive in June 1483. Since then, their spirits have become regular visitors. In 1953, guards Thomas Willoughby and Richard Halliwell each saw the two boys separately, just 15 minutes apart, precisely at 3 a.m. Both men, interviewed independently by the Tower's constable, Field Marshal Sir Gerald Templar, gave identical descriptions, including the embroidered nightshirts the boys wore. These details matched the Tower's inventory records from 1483. In 1990, Sister Catherine Morton, a visiting nun, captured the now famous photo of two shadows in the window of the Bloody Tower. Subsequent analysis by the British Society for Paranormal Research found that her film had been exposed to unusually high levels of electromagnetic activity. Physicist Dr. James Henderson stated, "The EM readings from this film are consistent with what we'd expect from a significant paranormal event. The spectral presence of Lady Jane Grey, the 9 Days Queen, has been so frequently documented that the Tower staff maintains a special log for sightings on February 12th. The group encounter of 1957, witnessed by 23 tourists and 2 yeoman guards, included American visitor Margaret Bourd, coincidentally sharing a name with Henry VIII's mother, who wrote in her travel diary, "The air was thick with sorrow, and through the mist we did not see actors, but history itself bleeding before our eyes." Chief Yeoman Arthur Crack's account described the unmistakable sound of prayers in French. Lady Jane was known to have recited Psalm 51 in French moments before her death. In 1998, a group of Japanese tourists captured mysterious audio recordings of a young girl's voice reciting that same psalm in 16th century French, confirmed by Oxford linguists to match pronunciation patterns of that time. Supernatural activity in the White Tower extends beyond ghostly apparitions. The building's medieval architect, Gundulf of Rochester, is said to appear during renovations, most recently in 2011, when Mason James Harper reported detailed conversations with a Norman knight concerned about the mortar mixture. A 1999 study led by Dr. Elizabeth Chambers of the Society for Temperature Research recorded not only cold spots but electromagnetic fluctuations aligned precisely with the tower's historical execution sites. Where blood was spilled, Dr. Chambers noted, the air itself seems to remember. The most dramatic recording occurred at the site where Margaret Pole met her brutal end, showing temperature drops from 20 degrees Celsius to -5 degrees Celsius in seconds, accompanied by inexplicable audio-matching contemporary accounts of her execution. Sir Walter Raleigh's ghost has become such a fixture that some now refer to his old quarters as Walt's study. His spirit seems particularly active during scientific conferences. In 2018, during a Royal Society meeting, several physicists reported the scent of pipe smoke and murmured Latin calculations in an empty room. Security footage from that night showed not only a robed figure pacing, but unusual light phenomena. Cambridge physicists described them as consistent with theoretical models of spiritual energy manifestation. Raleigh's final words before execution, "Strike, man, strike," are still occasionally heard echoing through the Bloody Tower at dawn. Most recently, night guard Stephen Matthews documented such an occurrence in December 2023. The supernatural geography of the tower extends to its lesser-known haunted spaces. In the Salt Tower, where alchemist Henry Croft was imprisoned in 1590, visitors have reported the scent of sulphur, the sound of clinking glass, and occasional bursts of inexplicable blue light from the stone walls. The medieval palace, once home to Henry III's polar bear, a gift from the King of Norway in 1252, is linked to ghostly roars and claw marks that appear and vanish during full moon nights. In 2020, motion sensors in the area detected large animal movements while the space was empty, prompting a week-long investigation by historic royal palace's security. The most recent documented paranormal event occurred in January 2024, when a team restoring the Queen's House experienced what they described as a temporal slip. For several minutes, they found themselves seemingly transported to the 16th century, surrounded by the sounds, smells, and sights of Tudor England. One worker described seeing Catherine Howard running down the corridor, screaming for mercy, exactly as she was known to have done before her execution in 1542. The incident, witnessed by 5 restoration workers and filed in an official report, included details about Tudor furnishings later confirmed in archival records previously unknown to the witnesses. As veteran yeoman guard John Kane wrote in his 2023 memoir, Guarding the Ghosts of History, "In the tower, the past is not simply remembered, it is still happening, layer upon layer like pages of a book that refuse to turn. They say the tower is a place where ghosts walk, and as the centuries pass, these stories remain woven into the very fabric of British history. The tower, once feared as the gateway to death, now stands as a solemn reminder of those who lived and perished within its walls, where time itself seems to stand still." Thank you for joining me on this journey through the secrets and shadows of the tower. Until our next exploration, remember, the voice of history is never silent, nor are the echoes that remain. Farewell, and may the stories of the past inspire us all.